All right, you're on.
Carol never.
This stuff out of the way, that's much more important. Yeah, there you go. Wow.
I've talked to her about it.
I think that we have that.
They're not fixed again. I mean, that's a, I
So I
know,
told her I was
started.
going to.
That's so
And she
great.
said, oh.
It's like an arms
I
race.
was getting mine.
It's like an arms race.
I'll just eat dinner. I just.
Now it's so comforting.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, you could.
I know, I just think it's.
No, it's called the trick. It's called how it got to DJs.
Fine, thank you.
It's called the trick to DJs.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to actually spend quite a bit of time today off book because I think it's interesting. So last week we talked, and I think you'll think it's interesting. You'll tell me if I was right or not. We talked last week about Shabbat and its meanings.
No, I'm gonna move over there.
No, I
No, there's an, I don't,
and tonight we're going to explore the observance of Shabbat and what that looks like traditionally and what it looks like for each of us and what questions we want to be asking ourselves. When I was a first-year rabbinical student, I came home for a break from Jerusalem, and I was out for lunch with my mom and one of her friends. And her friend said to me in the way that people ask first-year rabbinical students, so, I don't keep kosher, does that mean I'm a bad Jew? And I said, and I still believe this to be true, that if you made a decision about your observance and you don't question it again, then you're not living in the tradition of our people. Which doesn't mean that you have to say yes. You might say yes to something and question it and then say no. But that ours is a tradition of questions and that we fall into patterns and inertia. And the idea of tonight is to, of this hour at least, is to help us raise the questions we need to ask ourselves about our own Shabbat practice. This is not a judgmental space. There's not a right way and a wrong way. But you know, what I said to this friend years ago, I will just want to sort of set us up that way. If there is a wrong way, the wrong way is inertia. That make sense? Okay, so what I want to start with, on your roadmap, supplement A is a little exercise. And you'll see it's also supplement B. We'll be doing it again at the end of class, and you'll see if anything has changed for you. So, privately, circle whichever of these you consider appropriate and desirable activities for Shabbat. And then there are two questions at the bottom. How do you define work and what in your life do you consider to be work? And how do you define rest and what in your life do you consider to be restful? See the questions at the bottom? It's going to take like 3 minutes.
So just circle 2.
No, as many as you want. No limits. 30 more seconds. Okay. We're not going to share now. At the end, when we do it again, we'll have hopefully a few minutes to talk about your reflections, your thoughts, what might have changed for you or not. What we're going to do for the next little bit of time is we're going to break into Fabruta, and if you turn the page over, you'll see two supplements B and C. So there are two versions of the Ten Commandments in the Torah, one in Exodus and one in Deuteronomy. And the commandment, we looked at this last week, the commandment to celebrate Shabbat is not identical in the two versions. There are a few other differences, but what you see here is pretty much like a line-by-line comparison of the two versions. And what I want to ask you to do in Chavruta is to spend a few minutes looking closely at these two texts and identifying what you think what are the primary similarities and what are the primary differences. And if you can assign any meaning to those, I invite you to do so. If not, we'll talk about why it matters that some parts are similar and some parts are different. But we're going to take a good 5 to 7 minutes to really dive in closely. So find somebody maybe who you haven't learned with recently, and enjoy that.
Find somebody who maybe want to put that right. That's
Right from the get-go.
Lots of small Okay, so we need to.
Saturday. I seem very similar. I mean, I guess.
Right, that is a bit different.
Observe, and then it becomes, and then the next line.
Right, yeah, so there's that.
So this is a commandment.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
Don't you think?
Well, I guess.
Versus.
Yeah, one of them is just. Working till even next to this, keep it.
Well,
So there's.
Now it is.
Right?
Yeah. And then when you get down remember she was slave land, so basically.
It's the same thing.
Binding.
Lines that are similar.
So,
You know.
and it wears in
That seems
next to
significant.
I mean,
doing
so it's essentially it's all the way down, except in Exodus you can have your
Oh, yes, you're right.
yeah, I mean it's your slave boy cattle, it just leaves out the oxen.
Oh, yeah, man. So, second.
But I mean just
that's what I see. Did you?
Yeah.
So the other thing is like observe,
I mean, I think they're just talking about semantics. Somebody from Baltimore or something. I don't think it's saying, yes.
Well, like, again, my word. Everybody. Where exercise was saying that.
Right, it does. But I think the reason you're doing this is because that's how I did this. Through more detours.
Emulate versus obey.
What else do you see? But I think they obey as a basic, we have to know your slaves. It's almost like it's quid pro quo, right? I was your slave, I
Yes, well, but remember getting around. Yeah,
So I think we got more because you were once not anything once.
You mean the second one, right?
Because I said versus the other side.
Right, because I said so, and then because I was good to you.
well,
right, that's consistent with
I
mean, that was, excuse me.
No, I
slaves have a higher
I think that's why this is so talented. So you're ministering by slave what I'm saying is that
I feel back to basic, I'm but to honor that, the question is, second is imitate God, God's rest.
I didn't realize that.
Imitate God, and then third one is the covenant. Israel, and that's what's really important.
There's a lot in there.
I mean, I like what, I think we like to say it.
Well, it's one of those things where
It would be
the key word is doing
but I think
But then there's something really interesting, it's a really good story.
and this is more.
I know, I've read about this.
this happens so that
Well, Exodus.
That's not very much. They're trying to make sense.
Although it's fascinating, see it as the light that sheds.
So they're trying to figure out,
People misbehave then.
Well, that's
why two different versions. That's what they were trying to figure
no,
out.
it is.
Why we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
I do
Right, that has nothing, right, exactly.
So maybe we didn't know.
I understand that. Like I do feel like
Put his paper, right? And the word, they go, that's a good question. So this but that's a good question.
Maybe, that's one idea.
Apparently when the missionaries came,
Correct.
so commended. Very.
they didn't have a concept.
Well, no, it's not. It
There's
isn't
no
why.
help in it. So it's like, what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I told you to.
There are a lot of times where God just says, do it because I said so. But this is not one.
Gives you a reason.
Do it because you know what it's like
For you
to not get to our needs. I think there's a connection.
So you were telling me what that
Yeah, so, it's.
Yeah.
So Deuteronomy is reminding you that it will come in during the Exodus.
Right. And then
I'm trying, this has so much to do with God.
So the first one
Does it mean observe?
So I don't know, when I was going down the list of things I like to read, there were only a couple that I thought.
We're gonna take another 60 to 90 seconds Yeah.
The first time you're
Right, yeah, right.
And here it's just.
Even on the bike.
In some ways, it's something more gentle.
You know, check your email card.
Yeah, check your closet now, in your room now. Like everything else, I thought, yeah, that could be all right. No, I don't.
I don't mind that term. I don't want to cook meals and do lots of
Yeah. I did exercises.
No.
So then,
Giving your.
that's just, that's a reminder of why you're.
What you need is now.
Said like the
So, like,
sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Said that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I'll probably be going to nursing home.
Right, really, I would.
But I don't know.
This one is first,
They did this for the
Going to a concert.
century.
this one is,
Four games from.
this is what I got.
It certainly is.
And then there was some
Instead of
melding.
But
Why just
yeah, so you.
The story of Noah. And
Well, there's that part of it, but it's
yeah,
also
but
that,
basically, there's two strands in the story, and it's
like you were a slave.
very, it's really that one.
I would go back to the project. Just the size of
Just each of them, we're gonna come together.
You're not going.
You're not going to the whole city, exactly, so.
Okay. We'll look at you together. All right, so let's, what did you figure out? What we were talking about back here in the corner for a minute is this is what we just, the question we just explored in here is in the tradition of the rabbis. So every word in their rules of hermeneutics of interpretation, every word is intentional. Everything that's the same is intentional. Everything that's different is intentional. There are no accidents. It's not like, they're not JPD, right? It's not that they forgot to include this, but if it's not there, it's not there for a reason. And if it is there, it's there for a reason. And so what the rabbis would do is try to figure out, to parse meaning from the details of the text. So what did you notice? What did you figure out?
Well, the word command has a very important place in this Deuteronomy version. And even starting with observe as opposed to remember, Lord God has here commanded, and then again, command on the final phrase. So it seems more of a demand or a obligatory.
Yeah,
observance.
prescriptive. Okay. What else?
Doesn't shamor mean guard?
Yes, well, shamor means guard or protect. It is understood in this context to mean observe.
Yeah.
That's how you guard and protect the Shabbat, the way the rabbis understand it, by observing its commandments.
I thought we had this discussion. One thing I thought was the first version, it kind of almost asks you to aspire to be godlike and to observe these things because God doesn't act this way, because you have this role model. And then a few books later, it's like, no, you need to do this, this is important, and this is why.
Well, what's the rationale for the Deuteronomic commandment?
The rational.
Yeah, why? So if Exodus is saying, this is in the tradition of, be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy, what is Deuteronomy saying? Observe Shabbat because you were a slave in Egypt, right? Because you know what it's like to not get to rest. And that's what obligates us. Our own experience obligates us. And the way I understand it is that it's much more sort of human-centric, right? The first one is be holy, be like God. The second one is You know what it's like, and your experience obligates a certain observance. Okay, what else?
I mean, consistent with that, there's more focus on slaves in the second one. And in particular, the point that your slaves may rest as you do, so it's a higher level of rest that you can treat it as something equal to you for that day.
Exactly, and we looked at that a little bit last week, that the as you do is saying that you're, just because you have a different station in life doesn't mean that your humanity is any different from their humanity. Anything else?
We also puzzle a little bit about the line about the strangers in your settlements, where the wording is a little bit different. And we wondered whether in Deuteronomy it was intended to be more inclusive. So it doesn't have the word within, it just says strangers in your settlements. So it seems like the stranger could be someone who might not actually live in your settlement, but wandered in and should be treated in the same way.
Interesting, I never thought about that. I also realized that I left letter R on your.
We got it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We need to see that.
So I'm curious.
Anyone have an interpretation for why the ox and ass are included in Deuteronomy but not in Exodus? Because I don't.
No, obviously Deuteronomy, whoever's writing Deuteronomy is a little bit more verbose, but, I kind of missed the slave piece in Deuteronomy. I sort of look at Deuteronomy much more harshly.
Okay, say more.
It's basically obey, do as I say. I did this for you in Egypt, therefore, you gotta do what I say. So, but I like the other interpretation. But
Though I'm not sure that they're actually all that distinct, right? Because what you just pointed out to nuance what you said over here is you should do this because God freed you from Egypt, so you should be godlike in giving freedom or release, even for one day a week, to your slaves and your animals. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just, but it's sort of interesting, but the Exodus version is after they left Egypt, right? Because it's Sinai. It's Sinai.
Yeah.
So it's already, and so all of that sort of applies. I guess maybe they haven't tasted freedom yet.
Well, they haven't really, Deuteronomy, they've just been complaining, so, they're not in the promised land yet. But that's actually a really interesting question that you ask. Why, right after the Exodus, are we told to look back at creation? And then, why isn't the Exodus reason compelling immediately after we were freed from slavery?
We're getting the benefit of the doubt that you're going to emulate and you're going to observe Shabbat and all these other things because it's actually the right thing to do. But then by the time you get to Deuteronomy, the golden calf and the complaining, and then I got to be a little more heavy-handed with these folks here because they're just not getting it.
So I would say that one thing what we discussed, and then we'll share with you, is that when I think about something also about yachts and the that basically this is happening much, and actually Nathan just mentioned something. This was happening at this time, this did Mount Sinai. So, and there's a lot of laws related to Shabbat in between these two sections, and therefore this could be much more of a codification, as well as there's all in the desert they were complaining all the time. And this is basically I think that. The other idea I had about the Atzimias, it's very clear those are designated as work animals, whereas cattle are not. So I think so one is for that. The other is I think it's making very clear, anticipating the legalistic way people are. So well, I'm not doing the work; it's my mule that's pulling the plow. So therefore, it's kind of closing the loophole.
That's right.
I love that.
You want to go talk to some people in Washington about
I have a question. So I'm always thinking about it as, we're focusing on the rest and the Shabbat. But is the 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, is that also prescriptive?
Yes.
Right, you're not gonna slack off the rest of the time.
There is work to do in this world.
Right.
You know, we use words like holy and profane. But profane is really a poor choice of words, or holy and ordinary. Because the work is sacred and the rest is sacred. Like you can't just take every day, like every day is not Shabbat. You know, we are partners with God in creation and in repairing the world, and we have work to do. And by the way, when we got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, if we want to eat, we have work to do. Right, on a much more like, or in Hebrew is gashmi. Geshem means rain, like a more practical, tachlis, earthy reason. So yeah, absolutely. I think the sort of context is work has become, when the rabbis are figuring this out, work has become normative, rest is not. Because you gotta cultivate your crops, you gotta take care of your animals, you gotta, you know, all of those things for livelihood. Okay.
Why does it say son, daughter, or slave, but doesn't say wife?
Yeah. That is a great question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, answer it.
Are they talking about?
It's addressed to all adults.
What?
It's addressed to all adults.
That would be a lovely interpretation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with it. All right, so just for a moment, let's look at letter C here. So the rabbis are asking why, you know, and how can, if they're written twice, but in Deuteronomy, the idea is that Moses is repeating what God said in Exodus. So why is it different? How is it possible to have these two different sets when God only spoke these words once? So the rabbis ask, can two distinct sounds be caught at once? Has it not been taught, remember and observe were spoken in a single utterance, a thing which transcends the capacity of the human mouth to utter and of the human ear to hear? So what are they saying?
And God said two things at once.
At once, yeah.
And Moses caught them both, but
Well, we couldn't catch them at the same time. Like we can only hear one thing at a time, but that doesn't mean, you know, it says when God spoke at Sinai, the rabbis say that we each heard what God said according to our own capacity. So God spoke in one voice, and each one of us heard something different. And that's so, I think what's important about this is that one of these is not elevated as more important over the other. And for those of you who are familiar with the liturgy of Kabbalat Shabbat, with Lecha Dodi, the prayer that welcomes the Shabbat bride, the very first verse says, Shamor v'zachor. Shamor is observe, zachor is remember. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, in one dibur, one speech, one moment. So that's how Lecha Dodi starts, is by saying, God said both of these at the same time. Okay, so you heard you're familiar with the term Shomer Shabbat or Shomer Shabbos? What does it mean? When you say someone is Shomer Shabbos?
They observe Shabbat.
They observe Shabbat how?
They don't drive, they work.
Strictly.
Yeah.
According to a strict interpretation of Jewish law. I think there's a range of strict, but a traditional interpretation of what it means to observe Shabbat. So the term has been appropriated, largely appropriated for a particular interpretation. So along comes, we looked at something of his last week, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, from Reform rabbi, mystic, teacher, writer in San Francisco right now. He spent most of his career in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And here is what he has to say. Work is to Shabbat like chametz is to Pesach. Come twilight on Friday afternoon, I announce, all my jobs, tasks, and work, whether they are done or not, I hereby declare are done. I reject their claim on me. I deny their existence. When we get to Pesach, you'll see this language in the burning of the chametz the night before Seder. Heschel taught us that the Sabbath is a sanctuary in time, and I would suggest that the reason, at least in part, is because ordinary time has come to an end. Life goes on, but without clocks. For not only have we closed the books on the past week, we don't care about next week either. On Shabbat, there can be no future, only eternal present. How hard is that these days? To just be present where you are. Without a future, everything we do and the reason for everything we do can only be here and now. If the world work is at last done, then you cannot do anything toward making it better later, because there is no later. Shabbat is a day-long spiritual fiction by which we are permitted to stop planning, preparing, investing, conniving, evaluating, fixing, manipulating, arranging, staging, and all the things we do, not for the sake of doing them, but with an ulterior motive, for the sake of some future accomplishment. Most of us can forget the past and its imperfections with some practice. But to cut ourselves loose from planning and evaluating and fixing things for the future is unimaginable. We rest so we can go back to work. We play so that we can go back to work. We love so that we can go back to work. One ulterior motive after another, living in the future. We are either tied through our uncompleted tasks to the past, or compulsively drawn through our need to complete them into the future. We stubbornly convince ourselves that all we need to find tranquility is to haul a little bit of past into the present, or take just a little bit of the present and arrange it for the future. On Shabbat, we do not have to go anywhere. We are already there. We need a way to describe liberal